Hello, can everyone hear me? Okay. Hello everyone, my name is Srikanth Nandiraju. I am a principal engineer at the PayPal Labs. I'm going to talk about payments integration into your Android mobile application. I'll try to enlighten you with my entertaining presentation. Hopefully you like it. So this is my contact on Android Nexus S. So my email is srikanth@x.com, just in case if you want to reach me for any questions. That's my email. I'll be around after this presentation, so if you need any help on payment integration, just come grab me. As a part of today's agenda, I'll be talking about a few things like why you need to use PayPal, and we'll look at some of the use cases and the buyer experience that they'll see on the device when they go through a payment flow. We will also look into different types of payment types, and then we'll go over the steps involved in MPL integration in your Android project. We'll look into some code, and then after that I'll take the questions at the end. So why PayPal? PayPal is the leader in online payments for over a decade now. And PayPal moves about $80 billion per year in transaction. So the servers are very mature and they're very powerful. So the risk and fraud detection capabilities of PayPal are the best in the industry. So when you use PayPal APIs for your mobile application development, you get all of them for free. So that's why you should use PayPal in your Android applications. Moving on to the next topic of payment use cases for your Android applications. There are different ways you can use payments on your mobile apps. For example, you can make payments for goods or services or donations, or you can do payment from person to person. And you can also do a subscription kind of payments, which is a new feature of the PayPal payment library, which we will look into in a moment. Let's look at the goods and services flow. This is the flow which the buyer sees on the phone when you integrate the PayPal payment. So if you are trying to sell physical goods from your mobile app, like if you have a storefront and you are trying to sell physical goods, then you need to get the shipping address of the buyer. So that is when you will use this flow where you can see the shipping address of the buyer can see the shipping address when they try to check out from the app. There's a flavor of this payment where you don't need to have shipping address. So that is when you use a flag when you mention to the API that you don't need a shipping address, then the buyer will just see a pay button without the shipping address. You can also build applications that can take donations from your mobile app. So in that flow, the buyer will see a login screen, and then he will see a donate button instead of a pay button. So that's all taken care of by the library when you use the PayPal MPL in your Android project. Personal payments is very simple. That is paying from person A to person B. So the buyer will just see the pay button when they try to check out. And then subscriptions, this is my favorite part of the MPL library. You can set up a billing agreement from a buyer to your application for a future payment. And if you want to move money from the buyer account to your account for a future payment, you can use this. It's more like a recurring subscription capability. So the buyer basically will log into the PayPal application, PayPal flow, and then they will just look at this billing agreement. So they are not doing anything at the time they log in. They are just kind of giving a consent that I'm agreeing for a future payment that this merchant would pull money from my PayPal account. There's a small security feature that is added into this, which is called as the PayPal PIN. So when You can have the buyer set a pin when they try to create this billing agreement. So you set a flag in the API, and the API will prompt for configuring the pin for the buyer on the mobile phone. When you try to make the actual money movement call from your backend, you can actually prompt the user to enter the pin in the flow that your application will be owning. And then you can pass that pin to the API, and the money actually gets moved. So there are different payment types that PayPal supports. These are categorized as simple, parallel, and chain payments. Simple payments are simple to understand. You just send money from person A to person B, and you can see the email of the person who is actually receiving the money. Parallel payment is also simple to understand. What you do is you make a payment to one or more receivers in one shot. So in one transaction, you can pay money to different receivers, and you can still see who is receiving the money at the time of checkout from the device. And chain payment is also simple to understand. Chain payment is a little different in the sense, as a buyer, you pay to a receiver, and we call the receiver as a primary receiver. And behind the scenes, the money gets actually split like a parallel payment. But as a buyer, you will not be able to know who are the other receivers on the other side of this primary receiver. This is very useful when you're trying to build applications that use kind of a commission model, where you are kind of doing the proxy, or you're like the broker, and then you receive some commission and then split the other payments to other receivers in the flow. So these are the three different types of payments. And now we will go over the steps involved for MPL integration. So MPL stands for Mobile Payment Library, just in case if you're curious. So we use that term a lot. So if you talk to any PayPal representative, they'll say MPL. So MPL means it's a payment library. At a high level, there are these few steps that the developer has to go through when they want to integrate payments into their Android mobile applications. The library basically creates activity for the checkout flow. So there are a couple of things that you have to take care of when you're trying to define an activity. You basically define it in the Android manifest file that you're going to use PayPal activity, and then PayPal activity will basically try to connect to the PayPal backend servers. So it requires internet permission, so you need to declare the permission in your manifest. And then it also requires device access capability for enhanced security. I'll talk about it in detail in the code section. And then pretty much you are done with the configuration. And then you download the jar file from our website, and you just drop it into your Eclipse project where you are building your Android application. That will basically set up the environment to start making the required method calls in your Android application. So there are like these are basic setup calls. You initialize the library with an application ID that you need to get from PayPal, and then you create a PayPal branded button that you need to put it in your application. And when the buyer clicks on the button, you handle the call. And what you do in the call is you create an intent for payment, and there is a structure to do that. And then you pass this intent on to start an activity, and that activity is basically the full checkout flow which the library owns. And then once the buyer goes through the checkout flow, the library will notify your code that the payment has gone through, or whether it was canceled or there was an error. So there are two ways to do that. One is to listen for on activity result, which could be either result OK, result canceled, or result failure. Depending on that, you can do a messaging to your user. There is another way of handling the callback of a payment is to pass in a delegate. That is what PayPal recommends. You pass in a delegate and you implement certain methods in the delegate. So that is a better way to get notified when a payment goes through successfully. Because activity takes a little while to close down. So if you want to know whether the payment went through or not, the delegate approach would be the fastest. And then what happens after the payment? After the payment, by default, PayPal has this capability to notify both the sender and the receiver that the money has moved. And then that feature we call, there is a feature we call instant payment notification, which is also an API based. You configure a URL and then you will get notified about the payment transaction. And then you can always get the transaction details by passing in the information that you received from an activity to an API, which we call as a transaction details API. And then there is this refunds capability where you can either go manually into your PayPal account and then refund, or there is a refund API which is covered on our documentation section under x.com. Let's look at some code snippets. All the code that I'm going to show here is available on x.com/mobile. And the documentation also has 2 example applications that you can basically pull into your Eclipse project and then build and run. So I picked up this code from the simple example from the documentation where you basically define the activity. The activity's name is called PayPal activity. And then the other things that you need to also mention in the manifest is to allow internet permission to the application, and then device state access. I was mentioning earlier that the PayPal library will use some information from the device to make sure or to track any fraudulent activity. So if you are developing an application using PayPal MPL, you need to get separate application ID for each of your applications. So if you get an application ID for one app, you cannot reuse that application ID to the other app that you want to develop. So you need to get different application IDs for different apps that you are building on Android. The next thing that you will do is to initialize the library. So there's a method called init with app ID, and you pass the context of your application, and then you pass in the application ID that you get when you sign up for PayPal mobile payments. And then you can test against a sandbox environment where you can create test accounts to see how the money is flowing and how the notifications are happening when the actual money moves. And then there is an option to set a language, because PayPal supports different language for the library. And then you set the fee payer, like who will pay the fee for this transaction. There are different models. So if you go to paypal.com/fees, you can see the different topologies on how you can distribute the fees between the receivers. And then there is an option to enable or disable shipping. Like if you remember the first flow where there was a goods and services flow where you wanted to get shipping address, then you set this flag to true. But if you don't want shipping address, you just set this flag to false. And that's the mandatory method you need to do before you make any payment calls into the library. The next thing is to create a PayPal button. This button is an extension of a linear layout. It's basically a PayPal branded button. So if you are familiar with the PayPal button, it's like a yellowish button which has different sizes to fit your needs. Like there are thicker, larger buttons that might look well on a tablet, was smaller size buttons that might look good on a smartphone. And then after you create the button, you need to add that to your activity, and you need to register for the on-click event on that button, which you do by calling the set on-click listener, and you call you pass in a context of your application. And this is the crux of the payment library, where you create an intent. And the intent is a specific structure. It's a class that PayPal has built as part of the library, which we call as the PayPal payment. And then you can set all the properties to this object, like the currency, the email of the recipient of this payment, the total, and you can set the payment type as payment type goods or services. And if you remember the flows that we saw initially, depending on what you set in this payment intent, the appropriate flow will trigger when the user clicks on the buy button. The intent also has some additional capabilities, where like if you want to put information about your inventory item, you can create an object called PayPal invoice data, which is basically the data that is basically the amount that if you have multiple line items, you can also do that by creating a PayPal invoice item. All the information that you put in here will appear in the transaction details for the buyer when they go to paypal.com and look at their transaction history. So it's a very useful feature. And then finally, you link all these references together into this container intent, which is PayPal payment. And then we will use this intent to start the activity in your on-click callback. So in your on-click callback, you call this intent. So this code where it says example simple payment method call, that returns intent object, which is a structure that you have populated with your item that you are selling to this buyer. And then you basically start an activity for a result, and you pass in the intent. That's when PayPal library will take over, and then you will see the user interface depending on what kind of payment type you have set in the library. So once the buyer flows through the experience, he logs in with his credentials, confirms the payment. There are three things that can happen. When the activity is complete, you will get a callback which says on activity result, and the result could be okay. You know, everything is green, payment went through, and the library will give something called as a pay key, which is a reference to the actual payment transaction, and that you can extract it from the extra parameter called extra pay key. Activity could have been cancelled, so in that case, you'll get a callback and you can message appropriately to the user. And there could be some error on the PayPal side. There are different error codes corresponding to different situations that you can find on the documentation on x.com. So that is how you handle the end-to-end life cycle of a payment flow with the library. And then just to, like for the UML fans who want to see a sequence diagram, I know someone approached me yesterday to get a flow chart. I couldn't do a flow chart, but this is the closest I can find that can hopefully give, I know it's, you're right, yeah. So this is what we just discussed. Your buyer will launch your app. Your app will basically init with the app ID, and then you can set the server. There is like a production server and a sandbox server. You can use a sandbox server for testing initially, and then once you init the library, PayPal will return an object back to your code, and you should call that only once in your code. It's a singleton class. If you try to call it multiple times, you'll get an exception in your code, and all this information is documented very well in the developer guide for MPL. And then you get the payment button, and then you add the button to your user interface. So that's the type of button that the user sees on the mobile app. And then upon the activity result, the library would send back this structure which has the status of the payment, and then depending on the flags, you can show the corresponding messaging to the user. So, well, you have built your app, you have tested it, everything is good to go. So what do you do next? So PayPal also has a approval process. So what you need to do is you need to package your app, you package your APK file, and you need to upload that file to PayPal site. So it's on x.com. If you go to x.com/mobile, you will have all the information as to where exactly you need to upload the app. And then PayPal typically takes 24 hours to review your app most of the time. It depends on the type of app that you're building. And then if everything is okay, PayPal will get back to you with a production app ID. And then you'll have to go and change your code to use this production app ID. And then you go live and make money. So with that, I'll answer any questions. And these are some of the links that are on x.com, which are very useful to get started with MPL. And I have a demo of the app that is part of the documentation. I can quickly run that and show it to you. Before that, I can actually, or maybe I'll run the demo, and then if you guys have any questions in the meantime, you can ask me, or I'll be around. So come grab me, and I can help you out with any code. Yep.
So the PayPal app that you send in the App Store has nothing to do with the secrets that we use here?
Sorry, sequence?
The PayPal app that's on the App Store has nothing to do with the secrets we're using here?
No.
Just checking.
Yeah. So this is nothing to do with the process. So you still might have to go through the marketplace approval process if there is any. Like I know Amazon is coming up with a marketplace, they will have their own rules, but Android is pretty much open.
And if we want to go through without going off into the PayPal checkout experience, they have to have had signed up for a subscription?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. And for subscription, it's a little, there are set of requirements for subscription and chain payments. That is all documented on the site. You need to have a special permission enabled on your credentials. Not everyone can just use chain payments, for example. So all the process is well documented. The examples are very good. Like the latest MPL version 1.1 has a lot of improvements. The subscription was a major feature released as part of 1.1. And the documentation is very good. The sample demo that comes with the documentation has all the use cases with all the best practices approach of putting payments into your Android application.
What are the currencies do you support right now?
So I think there are about 24 currencies that PayPal supports. The list is on the website. The currencies, the fees, everything is on the languages. There are different language support that is built into the MPL library. So for those who are building web apps which are non-native Android, there is also a mobile version of the checkout that is also available on x.com. You just go to x.com and search for mobile checkout. That is like a basic form that is optimized for devices. So it doesn't have all this fancy UI, but very basic UI for the user to log in and complete a checkout flow. Yeah, so the mobile checkout for iOS has a different flavor. It's called Mobile Express Checkout that is optimized for WebKit browsers. So you'll see these hardware accelerated animations for transitions and stuff like that. For Android, it's still the same, the regular web page, I would say. So I'll try to quickly run through the demo. And by the way, this demo is available on x.com as a part of the documentation. So if you are trying to integrate payments, I think this is a good place to get a reference code. You can pretty much copy paste the code into your project and then remove all this basic debug messages from those demo apps. Let me check if I have the internet connectivity. No. So any more questions? Yeah. Yes. Yes, yes, it's the same one. Yeah. Yeah. Not so. Basically, the way donation works is you need to have a EIN number. So there is a process to go through the donation flow. So you need to. It should be a non-profit organization with an EIN, and there is a vetting process that PayPal has to approve to receive payments through PayPal. Yeah, so if the user does not have a PayPal account, PayPal will give an option. So if you cannot do that through the native app, there is no way to do that in the native app. But if you are using the web checkout flow, PayPal will provide an option for non-PayPal users to pay through credit card. So the screen will be split into two sections where it says if you have a PayPal account, log in here. If you don't have a PayPal account, enter your credit card information here. So there is no direct way to make a payment to a non-PayPal account. So the only thing that PayPal can do is it can send an email saying that, hey, you received a PayPal payment, and then you need to verify your email account to actually get the money transferred to your PayPal account. Yep, I'm just starting my emulator. Was there a question again? So there is one API which is called adaptive accounts. That is one. It's not a direct way to send payments to someone, but you can have them. You can have a non-PayPal user to start creating a PayPal account. So I don't know if I've answered your question, but you cannot do a PayPal payment to a non-PayPal account through the Android native application today. You can maybe send the payment to an email ID, and the receiver, if they own the email ID, they will have to verify that email ID in order to move the funds from that account to the bank account. So they create some kind of a temporary guest account if they don't have a valid verified PayPal account. So here is a welcome message from my emulator. It always crashes, I don't know why, but the demo works. So how many of you use skins in your emulators? Yeah, I think there are pretty nice skins out there. So I see a lot of developers don't use the skin, but it's a nice way to do a demo if you are pitching tomorrow. So these are the different kinds of buttons for different payment types. And all the code for this is available as a part of the documentation. So the code, just trying to bring up my Eclipse back. Yeah, so this is the sample demo that is bundled in the documentation that you download from x.com. And remember to get 1.1, which has the subscription. And there are some fixes that just rolled out, I think, a few weeks back. There is a 1.0, which is a little old now. But if you want to use subscription with the latest and the greatest code, use 1.1. So I'll just quickly run through a simple payment. So this application is connecting to the sandbox, and I have created my sandbox account. I'll log into the app. Anyway, that's a demo password, so even if you could figure it out, you cannot do anything with it. It's a demo password anyway. So if you see on the bottom right side, you see this sandbox. That's an indicator that it's like it's a demo server. When you actually get your production app ID and you stick it in your code, you'll not see that red bar at the bottom. So this is a very simple payment flow. And I'll be around after this session, and if you have any questions, please come grab me, and I'll try to help as much as I can. Thank you.